Boris Johnson appoints aide who said institutional racism was a myth and railed against multiculturalism.
Here's a summary of the article.
Boris Johnson has appointed a Downing Street aide who railed against multiculturalism and said institutional racism was a myth to lead a commission on racial equality. Munira Mirza, director of the Downing Street Policy Unit who also worked for Mr. Johnson while he was Mayor of London, said it was not racism but anti-racist lobby groups to blame for some of the problems ethnic minorities faced. Mr. Johnson said there was much more that we need to do to combat racism, though he also urged ethnic minorities to consider the progress that had been made. In one piece from September 2017, the aide attacks the findings of a previous racial equality review by Labour MP David Lammy and argued that it was wrong to point the finger at institutional racism. In the article she suggested that the current accusations of institutional racism by lobbyists and activists were a perception more than a reality and that the accusations of racism themselves led to worse outcomes for people from ethnic minorities, particularly in the justice system. The Institute for Race Relations suggested that Ms. Mirza was probably not the right person to lead a review into racial inequality. Any inquiry into inequality has to acknowledge structural and systemic factors. Munira Mirza's previous comments describe a grievance culture within the anti-racist field, and she has previously argued that institutional racism is a perception more than a reality, a spokesperson said.
This post received a score of 26,000, with an upvote ratio of 88%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
Breaking: right-wing party holds right-wing viewpoints.
Big if true, large if factual.
Sizable if accurate.
Humongous if correct.
Swole if legit.
Gargantuan if for reals.
Mahusive if conclusive. Minimal if false.
Tories, still shit water, still wet.
A story as old as time.
True as it can be.
Barely even friends SSSS.
Then somebody bends.
Undemocratically.
And 5.
Boris and Trump's plan are the same plan. They've been in league since before Bojo got elected because they're both interested in siphoning off as much tax money as possible and profiting the richest of their friends. Governing has absolutely nothing to do with it. They'll continually deflect and commit scandal if it gets them to the next hurdle. Hopefully defrauding millions of citizens will make someone come after them eventually.
It's insane to me how poor people can look at these wealthy guys, who are clearly just trying to get wealthier, and think, yep, that's the guy for me, he really understands what I'm going through, and he really wants to help me.
Media propaganda. Keep repeating the same statements over and over until people think it's the truth.
Multiculturalism assumes all cultures to have equal positioning within a country, that there is no dominant culture and therefore no need to adopt the host country's culture or adapt to a new way of life. I prefer the concept of interculturalism, the idea that the host country's culture evolves through a cultural exchange via immigration and trade, but that there is nonetheless a pervasive culture one is expected to adopt and take part in.
Most people, multiculturalism is great. Same people, why are these immigrants not integrating to our Western way of life and subscribing to our Western social and human values?
Her wiki page is worth a look. A former but now reformed communist, she has a PhD in sociology and sits on innumerable committees. Her cogently expressed arguments against whatever multiculturalism means hardly amount to railing, but that's the independent of the facts for you.
A bit more complicated. She was a member of the RCP, as was I, and contributed to Living Marxism. However, this was well into the RCP's track to libertarianism. The RCP, and especially Living Marxism, LM, could be contrary almost for the sake of it. I mixed with Mick Hume in Manchester and Claire Fox, later Brexit Party candidate. I didn't trust either. Both were driven by wanting to be seen. I had little contact with Munira Mirza, but to link her to what most people would think of as communism doesn't really show what her mindset or opinions were.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.